The early November wind swept through the ancient pines of the Custer Mountains in Montana. Dead leaves were whipped off the ground, striking the dark trunks like spreading ink stains. Amid the desolate forest, an orange backpack lay alone beside a dry creek. No one had touched it. There were no footprints around it. And more notably, the zipper remained fully closed, untouched and unripped, as if no one had wrestled with it. A ranger named Joel was the first to see it. He hadn't originally taken that path, but a fallen branch blocking the old trail made him change course. Joel did not stop right away. He looked around, called out a few times, no answer. Then he opened the backpack. Inside was an unopened protein bar, a full water bottle, and a neatly folded rain jacket. Everything was arranged as if the person carrying it had paused for a rest, not in a way that suggested panic or theft. The distance from there to the official campsite was nearly 3 kilometers of forest trail, a stretch the group of high school students should have passed through the day before. They were on a tour run by a survival skills program jointly organized by the high school, with guides and supervision. A boy named Brayden Kwon, 16 years old, was recorded as having left the camp with the group at 6 in the morning to begin the return journey, but he never arrived. While the rest of the group reached the destination around 10:30 in the morning, Brayden was not on the roll call list. A classmate recalled that he said he wanted to go ahead a bit to take a few pictures while the mist was still there. Brayden's phone was on airplane mode with no signal since 7 in the morning. By the time the rescue team arrived at the site, Joel reported nightfall had begun to settle. There was no sound except the quiet trickle of water at the foot of the hill. The trees twisted, their trunks covered in moss and fungus. They searched thoroughly within a 500-meter radius. No shoe prints, no scratch marks, no fabric scraps, not even a strand of hair. There was only one thing that made everyone pause: a faint fingernail mark, as if someone had touched the trunk of a pine tree near the backpack. Just 3 marks, parallel, at chest height for a standing person. Nothing more. Flashlights swept back and forth. Cold crept into wrists and ankles. Someone whispered, "For the backpack to be left like that, someone must have had time to set it down again. But if they had time, why not take it with them?" No one replied. The temperature was near 0 degrees Celsius. If Brayden had simply wandered nearby, he would have left some kind of trace. But everything, from the dustless backpack to the way it sat squarely atop a flat rock, a few centimeters above the ground, as if someone had deliberately propped it up, remained unexplained. As they zipped it closed and prepared to take it back for trace analysis, Joel still turned to look one last time. For some reason, the final light of that day struck the backpack strap just right, casting a pale red glow, not from blood but from the feeling of something missing to the point of being colder than the wind. Brayden Kwon was born in Tacoma, Washington, the only son of a pair of Korean-born teachers who had immigrated to the United States in the early 1990s. He was tall, slender, and quiet, with a habit of carrying a camera everywhere he went, usually an old Pentax with a mint green strap. The photos he took rarely focused on the subject. Instead, he often captured the background: clouds through a bus window, the shimmer of street lights on wet pavement, or a dog sleeping in the corner of a classroom. Brayden liked silence, but according to his mother, he was not withdrawn. "He was always the kind who listened," she said in an interview later. "He never interrupted, but when someone needed him, he was always there." The trip to the Custer Mountains was an annual extracurricular activity organized by Hillbridge High School for 11th grade students. It was a 3-day, 2-night survival training program led by professional guides and supervised by both a physical education teacher and a part-time rescue worker from the Montana State Parks Department. A total of 18 male students joined this trip. They were divided into 3 small groups of 6, each following a designated trail route with handheld GPS units and paper maps. Brayden was placed in Group B, along with 2 classmates and 3 students from another class. The direct supervisor of the group was Mr. Rick Delgado, a 48-year-old former soldier, licensed wilderness survival instructor who had worked with the school for the past 5 years. The trip began on Friday, November 2nd. The early winter weather in Montana was cold, but dry, with no snow and light winds. According to the schedule, Group B was to leave the main campsite at 6 in the morning on Sunday, following the snow-capped trail along the creek to return to the Glacier Crest parking lot, a hike of approximately 4 hours. Brayden left the camp at 5:52, according to a group mate named Javier. He said he wanted to go a little ahead. Brayden liked photographing the morning mist. Everyone thought it was normal. He had done the same on last year's trip, staying only a few minutes ahead of the group. He had always followed the route properly, never once straying. But this time, by 10:30, when the group reached the Glacier Crest lot, Brayden was not there. At first, they assumed he had fallen behind or taken a slower turn, but the group's handheld GPS had not received any signal from Brayden's secondary device since 7:10 that morning. They called over the radio, no response. Brayden's phone, which he always kept on airplane mode to save battery, also gave off no signal. Rick instructed Group B to remain at the rendezvous point while he returned along the trail with 2 members of Group A to search. They walked back 2 kilometers, calling Brayden's name, checking both sides of the creek, and combing through nearby thickets, without results. What was strange, no student from any other group had seen Brayden along the trail. It was as if he had vanished within just 15 to 20 minutes after leaving camp. Local police were called at 1 o'clock that same day. A rescue team was dispatched that afternoon, splitting into 4 directions to search the forest area near the Snowcap Trail. By Sunday night, there was still no trace, and no one knew when was the last time anyone had heard Brayden's voice. By Monday morning, when Ranger Joel happened to discover the backpack nearly 300 meters from the main trail, in a location no students were allowed to enter, the situation began shifting from a missing person to something unusual. Mr. Rick, the guide, was temporarily suspended pending investigation. Hillbridge High School faced criticism for not equipping each student with a personal tracking system. Brayden's family immediately flew to Montana from Tacoma, hired a private search team, and set up camp near the scene. In a video recorded at the site, Brayden's mother stood silent in the forest, gripping the strap of her son's old camera she had found in his leftover luggage. She did not cry. She only asked, if he ever got lost, he would take pictures. So where are the pictures? By noon on Monday, when the orange backpack was brought to the temporary command post set up beside Glacier Crest, Brayden's mother, Mrs. Sumin Kwon, had already been there since 4 in the morning. She wore a thick wool coat, her hair hastily tied back, eyes still bloodshot from the overnight flight. Her hand clutched a small notebook. In it, she recorded every time, who said what, and when each action took place. Brayden's father, Mr. Paul Kwon, had remained in Tacoma to handle paperwork, speak with local media, and care for his elderly mother. But by the next day, he too had arrived. The father said little, standing silently for hours in front of the map table, marking every place that had been searched, was being searched, or had yet to be touched. As soon as the news spread, the Korean community in Tacoma immediately shared the information across social media. A search fund was established within 24 hours, raising over $12,000 to rent drones, search dogs, and a rescue specialist team from Denver. The main search force, comprising local police, Montana State Rangers, and the SAR, Search and Rescue Team, was divided into 3 search rings. The first centered around Snowcap Creek, where the backpack was found. The second covered the adjacent dense forest, spanning 3 square kilometers with rugged terrain and possible caves. The outermost ring followed the low mountain range stretching to the Canadian border. Thermal imaging drones scanned through the night but detected no human body heat. The dogs picked up a scent from the backpack, but the trail led to a sharp break, then stopped entirely. One volunteer, a former worker in Afghanistan, murmured, "He disappeared like a drop of water in the forest. No ripples." Even so, Brayden's family refused to stop. They printed hundreds of flyers, hired translators in Spanish, Hmong, and Blackfeet, the 3 most common languages in the local community, to ensure no one missed the message. They met with every household in the small town at the foot of the mountain, put up posters at gas stations, grocery stores, and churches. Hillbridge High School also issued an official statement, temporarily suspending all extracurricular activities. But online backlash did not ease. A wave of criticism targeted the school board. Why weren't students given personal trackers? Why was a student allowed to separate from the group? Why didn't the GPS issue an earlier alert? Flathead County Sheriff, Mr. Murray Hollis, appeared at a Tuesday afternoon press conference emphasizing, "There is no evidence that Brayden left this area, but there is also no evidence that he was attacked or slipped." When asked whether they suspected third-party involvement, he simply replied, "We are not ruling out any possibilities." What puzzled the rescue teams most was the weather. In the 3 days since Brayden went missing, the skies were dry, with daytime temperatures between 3 and 7 degrees Celsius, and nighttime lows around -2. If he were alive and merely lost, he could have built a fire, found shelter. But no fire had been discovered. No smoke, no calls for help, no cut branches, nothing at all. Some students in the group began to show signs of psychological distress. One boy named Kyle even refused to eat for 2 days, only staring at Brayden's photo. "I don't know what to say," he mumbled in a later interview. "He was just a few minutes ahead. How can a person vanish in a few minutes?" The locals, well acquainted with mountain accidents, initially assumed this was a simple case of someone getting lost. But by the 3rd day, with no physical evidence of Brayden's presence apart from the backpack, the atmosphere had grown heavier. A grocery store owner named Agnes said, "I've lived here 40 years. Some people have fallen into ravines, some chased by bears, but missing without blood, without footprints, without a sound? No, this is not normal." The media began to arrive. Spokane's KHQ-9 set up a tent outside the command post. A CNN reporter asked Mrs. Sumin directly, "Do you think your son is still alive?" She looked straight into the camera and spoke each word slowly. "I don't think. I know. He hasn't gone far, but someone doesn't want us to find him." On Wednesday morning, the 5th day since Brayden went missing, the search team began expanding toward the northeast, where the forest thinned out and connected to a low ridge intersected by underground water crevices. A SAR team member named Naomi spotted something reflecting light beneath a dry tree trunk. She bent down, brushed away the decaying leaves. It was a translucent white plastic fragment, about the size of 2 fingers, with slightly curved edges. At first she thought it was trash, but when she tilted it, a small logo appeared. Kodak, 200 ISO. It was a film canister cap. That same evening, the family confirmed. It was the exact type of film Brayden used, the only kind he still had, from an old batch he had purchased the previous year. But what stunned everyone was not the film cap, it was the location, nearly 1.5 kilometers from where the backpack had been found. An area not part of the group's route, and according to the topographic map, very difficult to access, requiring passage over 2 narrow rock crevices and several slippery slopes. No one had a reason to go there. Not someone lost, and certainly not a teenager carrying a camera. The area surrounding the film cap was cordoned off and searched thoroughly. Within a 20-meter radius, the SAR team found 3 freshly broken branches, green, about chest height for an adult, roughly 1.4 meters from the ground. One leaf still bore a faint scratch, as if something had brushed against it. Still, no footprints, no drag marks, no other belongings. Meanwhile, Brayden's phone continued to emit no signal, but that afternoon, an IT volunteer from the private rescue team attempted to check the data from a nearby mobile tower near Glacier Crest. Though the mountain region had poor coverage, the tower had recorded an unusual ping at exactly 10:47 on Sunday morning, 5 hours after Brayden had disappeared, from an unidentified device, roughly 2.6 kilometers southwest of the tower. This information was not made public, because the tech team could not confirm whether the device belonged to Brayden. But the family insisted. The search had to expand in the direction of the ping. The next day, the rescue team found another item, a black fabric strap, about 10 centimeters long, wedged between 2 rocks along the stream. The fabric was frayed at the edges and appeared to be part of a bag strap or a utility attachment. But the strange thing was, no one in the group could recall ever seeing Brayden with anything black. All his gear that day, according to photos and testimonies, was orange, green, and ash gray. The strap was sent for fiber analysis, but results had not yet returned. In the meantime, Mrs. Sumin brought it back to the tent, placed it beside her son's photo, and whispered, "If it isn't his, then whose is it?" On Thursday evening, a student named Daniel from Group B unexpectedly asked to speak privately with Brayden's mother. He brought a notebook. In the middle, a photo was taped. Brayden sitting on a rock by the stream, holding his camera, his gaze angled slightly behind the person taking the picture. The scene looked ordinary, unless one looked closely behind Brayden's back. In the left corner, blurred but distinct, was a figure, standing halfway in the shadows of the trees. Only part of a dark brown sleeve was visible. No face, no feet. But it had shape and volume, and notably, it didn't match anyone from the confirmed student groups that day. Daniel said, "I took this at 6:12 in the morning. I didn't think much, just liked the view and printed it when I got back. But yesterday I realized no one in our group wore brown. The photo was sent for enhancement. A photography expert confirmed that cannot be a light reflection. It has depth, a cast shadow, and a light source coming from the opposite direction. But no one dared to say for certain. Only one thing everyone could feel. If it was a person, then that person had stood still for a very long time in the forest without moving. On Friday morning, when the technical team finished enhancing the image of the figure behind Brayden in Daniel's photo, the entire makeshift investigation room at the command post fell into silence. No one spoke it aloud, but everyone saw the same undeniable thing. The figure behind Brayden was not just a person. It was someone watching, deliberately and aware of the camera. The stance was angled, half the body tucked into the shadows of the trees, the arm held still. That area, according to GPS coordinates, was right on the edge of the main trail, just a 7-minute walk from camp. Even more suspicious, cameras installed at the park entrance where the school bus had dropped off students recorded that everyone was wearing the group uniform, gray jackets, dark blue pants with reflective strips. No one wore brown. At the same time, a volunteer IT technician, Eric, uncovered another clue. He used data recovery software on the dash cam from the school's logistics ATV, the one that had transported gear from the rendezvous point to the campsite on Friday. The onboard memory card had captured a 9-minute video, unintentionally recording along the forest road when the vehicle stopped briefly for brake checks. At minute 6:14, while the vehicle slowly moved through a sparse section of forest, the camera caught someone standing to the right of the trail, just 400 meters from the main camp. The image was blurry, but the figure was tall, thin, wearing a hat and a brown jacket, strikingly similar to the figure in Daniel's photo. The timestamp on the video was 1:42 in the afternoon on Friday, 2 days before Brayden disappeared. Even stranger, that trail was completely restricted to outsiders, and the school had a full personnel log. No one had gone missing, gone ahead, or left camp at that hour. The footage was immediately forwarded to the Flathead Police Department. Sheriff Hollis issued a directive to expand the investigation to consider possible unauthorized human presence. A reconnaissance team reviewed forest maps and discovered a detail few had noticed. Just over 2.2 kilometers from where the backpack was found, there used to be an old ranger lookout station, abandoned since 1998 after a forest fire. No one from the camp organizers had mentioned the location, as the newer maps had removed it, labeling it a no longer accessible zone. But civilian satellite imagery still showed it, and clearly, the roof remained intact, the structure standing. On Friday afternoon, the search team decided to head for the old ranger station. The route was difficult, with thick vegetation. At some points, they had to use axes to clear the way. After nearly 4 hours, they arrived, and everything was almost untouched. A 2-story wooden cabin, the front door chained shut with rusted links, but the back door slightly ajar. Inside was pitch black, the air damp, smelling of mold, old rubber, and iron. Mud-caked footprints dotted the wooden floor, some very fresh. But what made the team freeze in place was a map pinned to the wall. A map of the Custer forest, marked in red ink, with a circle drawn precisely around the area where Brayden's backpack had been found. No words, no notes, just a circle. Beneath the map on the floor was a small object, a Pentax camera lens cap, compatible with the model Brayden used. A faint scratch along the lens rim. No dust. All physical evidence was collected. The police sealed off the cabin and issued an official statement. The disappearance was now being investigated under the possibility of intervention by an unidentified individual or group. On Friday night, after the discovery of the abandoned cabin with footprints and a camera lens cap, security around the command post was tightened. Police erected soft barriers around the coordination tents, barring media access. Brayden's family was asked to temporarily withdraw from the search area for safety reasons. Mrs. Suman reacted strongly. If someone is involved, we need to know. This cannot turn into a sealed case. That night, one of the search specialists, who had been to the cabin, suddenly withdrew from the team without explanation. His name was Ray Landers, 52 years old, a former Oregon State Ranger. He had a clean record, extensive experience, and was the first to identify the prevailing wind direction at the scene. But upon returning to camp, he packed up his tent and left that same night, leaving behind a handwritten note. I don't think he's still alive. I also don't think this is the first time. Before the news could spread, the next morning brought a call to the investigation hotline. No number, no area code. The voice was male, old, raspy. "You're looking in the wrong direction. The boy didn't go down the mountain. He was led higher up." The call lasted 12 seconds. In the background was the sound of wind clanging against something metallic, like a wind tower or an old telecom mast. Following the direction of the cabin, the investigation team identified a trail that had been removed from maps in 2002, once a supply route to a temporary weather observation station, now abandoned. A team of 4 was dispatched along this path, equipped with shoulder-mounted cameras and GPS devices. 3 hours later, the team stopped at a steep incline fitted with an old steel cable, once used to haul materials to the upper station. The cable was rusted but still taut, its end vanishing into the dense forest. As the team followed it, they discovered a green wool glove, the exact kind Brayden's mother had knitted for him, with BK embroidered on the inside of the wrist. The glove was dry, unstained, untorn, and lay neatly on a stone ledge as if someone had placed it there. But no footprints were seen. When the news was reported back to the command post, a student named Javier, Brayden's groupmate, suddenly had a panic attack. He struck the tent walls, shouting, "It wasn't a stranger. Someone knew exactly how we moved, knew every spot we'd split up." Javier was taken to the temporary medical tent and given a mild sedative. Later, he shared, "On the night before Brayden disappeared, he saw a stranger standing at the edge of the camp near the tree line. That person didn't move, had no flashlight, and wore a jacket identical to their guide Rick's." The incident led investigators to review all personnel records related to the trip. During the review, they uncovered that Rick Delgado had been investigated 12 years ago for allegedly tampering with GPS data during a summer camp program, linked to an incident where a student was separated from the group for 2 hours. The case was closed due to lack of evidence, but a startling coincidence emerged. The victim in that case also bore the surname Kwon and was a distant cousin of Brayden's, according to demographic data from Tacoma. When Mrs. Sumin heard this, she said only one thing: "I always found it strange that my son was chosen, even though he wasn't outstanding in physical training. Now I understand." And on Saturday night, after the series of shocking discoveries involving guide Rick Delgado, the investigation team summoned him to the command post for formal questioning. Rick did not refuse. He came without a lawyer, offered no defense, and simply said, "I didn't hurt the boy, but I think I may have been used without knowing." Over the course of 4 hours, Rick admitted that he was not the one who created the student group assignments. The list had come from the school, approved by someone named Trent Harris, the person in charge of extracurricular activities. Rick also had no access to students' health records or family background information. "When I saw Brayden's name, it felt familiar, but I didn't dare ask, because I knew if I asked, they'd pull me from the program." Rick recounted that during the summer camp incident 12 years ago, where a student named Kwon had briefly gone missing, he was asked to alter GPS data to avoid alarming the parents. He complied and was later briefly suspended. The incident faded, the boy was found safely, but Rick always felt something was off. "Since then, I've been invited back every year, even though I knew someone wanted me gone." When police attempted to locate Trent Harris, they discovered he had left the state on Thursday morning, citing care for an ailing mother. His phone was unreachable. Hillbridge School also unexpectedly locked internal personnel files, citing privacy protection. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued their search of the abandoned cabin in the Custer forest, and this time they found a small plastic bag, tightly sealed, beneath the bed on the second floor. Inside, a roll of 35mm film, undeveloped, with a scrap of paper taped to it, scribbled in shaky handwriting, "Snowcap 6 a.m., 11/4. The day Brayden disappeared." The film roll was rushed to Spokane for immediate processing. While waiting, Mrs. Sumin went and stood in front of the cabin. The wind was strong. She carried a small bag. Inside were family photos and a worn piece of fabric from Brayden's childhood blanket. She said nothing, but a rescue worker recalled, "She stood there for almost an hour, as if waiting for someone to open the door." By Sunday morning, when the film was developed, the results left the entire investigation team in a state of stunned disbelief. Among the 23 frames on the roll, the last 5 showed misty forest scenes taken from a low, slanted angle. Frame 22 captured a rock near the creek, the very spot where the backpack was found. But the final frame, frame 23, was taken from inside the cabin. The shot faced the window, rotting wooden frame, morning light filtering through the cracks, and at the edge of the image, reflected in the dusty glass, part of a cheekbone, a nose bridge, and the pupil of an Asian face, appearing to be standing right at the window. The image was blurry, no date or timestamp, but the light's pattern matched meteorological data, exactly 6:40 on Sunday morning, the time Brayden vanished. Police could not confirm the identity of the person in the photo. But one detail left everyone speechless. The cabin window faced west, in the opposite direction of the trail. If Brayden had been standing there, he had either been taken or gone, intentionally in the opposite direction. And if he was able to take a photo, why didn't he call for help? No one could answer. But from that moment on, the case was no longer considered a simple disappearance. On Monday, the 10th day since Brayden's disappearance, the investigation team made a strategic move. They released a still image from the film roll, showing the reflected face inside the cabin to the statewide police system, along with a note, "Identity needed. Suspected link to Custer disappearance."
No.
Within 48 hours, they received over 30 responses, but one name stood out across 3 separate sources. Leon Wu, 31 years old, a former freelance photographer with an outstanding warrant for trespassing in a restricted forest in Idaho in 2018. Wu had a known history of mild dissociative identity disorder, once claiming he did not belong to the electronic world, and had lived off-grid for years. The reason the matches aligned: in old photos of Wu, the eyes and nose closely resembled the face in the cabin image. Notably, Leon had reportedly been seen in the northern Montana forests, just 20 miles from the abandoned cabin, a few weeks before Brayden vanished. The FBI was immediately brought in to assist. A search warrant was issued for an improvised campsite at the edge of Flathead Forest Reserve, where someone matching Wu's description had been seen overwintering in a tarp shelter. At the site, they found a torn fabric tent, an old battery-powered radio, and a leather cord looped through a Pentax camera lens cap, identical to the kind Brayden used. But there was no person, no body, no blood, no ID. Only one scrap of paper pinned to a tree nearby, handwritten in pencil. "Not everyone who disappears wants to be found." This detail sharply divided the investigation team. One side believed Wu was behind the abduction, and that Brayden may have been lured, taken, or coerced into taking photos before being hidden away in the cabin. The other side, including Mrs. Suman, believed Brayden might have gone willingly with him, for reasons no one could yet understand. As all investigative focus shifted to Leon Wu, police suddenly received a forensic trace analysis. The black fabric strap found wedged between 2 rocks did not match any of Brayden's gear, but matched a lanyard type used for staff ID badges at Hillbridge School. The school was ordered to provide a complete personnel list, including short-term contract workers. On that list, one name stood out, previously omitted from the initial report: Peter Yarrow, equipment support staff, responsible for checking GPS batteries, cameras, and backup chargers before each trip. Peter had never been mentioned in the investigation. He had no criminal record, no complaints. But when police arrived at his residence, a temporary lodging facility in Spokane, they found the room vacated 2 days prior, the bed unmade, the laptop hard drive missing. The lodging manager said, "He left in the middle of the night, didn't tell anyone. I thought it was for work." Tracing Peter's backup GPS device, police found the last recorded signal came from the abandoned cabin at 4 o'clock on Monday morning, just hours before the film roll was discovered. All remaining hope of finding Brayden unharmed began to falter. There were now 2 adults involved, one a reclusive figure, the other a staffer who had handled student equipment. The old cabin might have been a meeting point, and the 16-year-old boy, quiet, fond of photography, never one to complain, had now been drawn into a web everyone sensed vaguely, but no one dared name. That night, for the first time since the incident began, Mrs. Suman did not sleep at the base camp. She went to the forest's edge, right where the backpack was first found, and sat there until nearly dawn. A search team member found her whispering to the wind, "If you're still alive, don't go any farther. I don't know how to keep looking." On the morning of the 14th day, as temperatures in the Custer forest dropped to -5 degrees, the search team scaled back operations. Drones were hindered by snow and ice. The number of volunteers gradually declined. But Brayden's family remained. They did not break camp. Around 11 o'clock that morning, a young park ranger, Sarah Vinning, was scanning the northwestern slope where Peter Yarrow's last GPS signal had been recorded, when she spotted something moving behind a moss-covered rock. At first, she thought it was an animal, but as she approached, she saw a pair of silver-gray sneakers, the kind Brayden had worn, placed side by side, neatly aligned. Each shoe had a small piece of paper tucked inside. She put on gloves and unfolded the first slip. Written in pencil in tiny letters were 2 words: "I'm still." The second slip: "Here." No signature, no date, but the paper was dry. The pencil marks had not smudged, and stranger still, a small pine twig, still moist with resin, had been placed right beside the shoes, a sign of life, or of something deliberately left behind. Police immediately expanded the search radius around the site, but they found nothing else. No footprints, no hair, no items. Experts believed that if Brayden was still alive, he had likely been moved repeatedly, possibly by someone else. But if he had moved on his own, he still had a chance of survival. The nearby stream had not frozen, and he possessed basic survival skills. The following day, Mrs. Sumin requested to enter the scene, where the shoes had been placed. She brought nothing with her except her son's old camera. As she stood beneath the shadowed canopy of pine trees, a strong gust of wind blew through, lifting the 2 slips of paper into the air. People startled and moved to chase them, but she raised her hand to stop them. "It's all right," she said softly. "If he left them, then he wanted us to know. He's still out there." The official search was suspended after day 18, but the case file remained open, and the old cabin remained sealed. Brayden Kwon's name had not been removed from the missing persons list. But in the heart of his mother, and on the map still hanging in the camp tent, a small red pin remained, marking the spot where the shoes were found, with a handwritten note in black ink: "Next time, we won't turn away." 1 month after the official search ended, snow began to fall steadily atop Custer. Every trail had been erased. The old cabin was sealed off with yellow tape, but the rotting wood wall in the back still bore the trace of a handprint, faint, at chest height, with 3 fingers. On a morning of -4 degrees, Mrs. Sumin returned there, one last time before heading back to Tacoma. She did not go with a group, did not bring a camera, nor request a permit. She simply walked, alone, to the exact spot where the backpack had once been found. There was nothing there anymore. Snow had covered the flat rock, and the creek whispered only the cracking sound beneath a thin sheet of ice. But she still sat down, gently placing a small silver handkerchief on the stone, embroidered with 2 words: Brayden. She did not cry. She only closed her eyes. It was said that that night, upon returning to camp, she opened the old camera that no one had touched throughout the ordeal. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film from the previous year, and among the aged photographs, there was one that stood out. Brayden, standing in the middle of the forest, slanted light across his face, his expression solemn, but his eyes alight. No one knew who had taken it. No one remembered it ever existing. But stranger still, the angle of the shot was from behind the rock where the backpack had been found. She told no one. She simply printed the photo, framed it, and placed it on the dining table at home. On the photo frame, a small note was taped, a handwritten line: "If you know how to wait, I won't stop walking." And every day, at 7 in the morning, the exact time Brayden had left camp, she opened the window. Even in winter, even when there was nothing outside but cold mist, just to let the wind come in, just so that if one day her son returns, he'll see that the house is still open.